You can't treat me like that.
The moment Barbara's feet touched the ground in Korea, she knew her carefully planned exchange year was about to spiral into beautiful chaos. The fluorescent lights of Incheon International Airport felt harsh against Barbara's skin as she stood frozen in the arrivals hall, her phone clutched in trembling hands. The text message glowed accusingly. Your host family had to cancel. Emergency accommodation arranged. Details to follow. 24 hours of flying from Nigeria, 4 layovers, endless customs lines, and now this. Barbara wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. Instead, she did what she always did. She straightened her spine, adjusted her leather jacket, and reminded herself why she was here. Korea wasn't just a dream anymore. It was her reality, whether it welcomed her or not. The airport bus to Seoul wound through streets that looked like they'd been pulled straight from the dramas she'd consumed like oxygen back home. Towering glass buildings pierced a sky painted in shades of twilight purple. Neon signs and Hangul script blazed from every storefront. The Han River stretched like liquid silver beneath bridges strung with lights. Barbara pressed her forehead against the cold window, her honey caramel skin reflected in the glass, and whispered, I made it, Mom. I actually made it. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. You're going to shine there, baby girl. You're going to show them what Nigerian excellence looks like. But as the bus deposited her outside a towering dormitory building in Gangnam, excellence felt very far away. The night air bit through her jacket. March in Seoul was nothing like March back home. She dragged her suitcase up the steps, each wheel click-clacking against concrete like a countdown to something she couldn't name. The dormitory manager, a thin woman with lips pressed into a permanent line of disapproval, barely glanced at Barbara's paperwork before handing her a key. Room 403, 4th floor, no elevator. Quiet hours start at 10 p.m., no guests after 8 p.m., no cooking in rooms. The woman's English was clipped, efficient, cold. Thank you, Barbara said, but the woman had already turned away. The room was smaller than her closet back home. 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 window overlooking a parking lot. Her roommate's side was immaculate, textbooks stacked by height, clothes organized by color, even the charging cables coiled in perfect circles. Barbara's side looked like a hurricane had just made landfall. She was unpacking her 3rd suitcase when the door opened. The girl who entered was petite, with hair dyed an ash blonde that somehow looked natural on her. She stopped mid-step when she saw Barbara, her expression shifting through surprise, confusion, and finally settling on something carefully neutral. Hi, Barbara said, offering her brightest smile. I'm Barbara, your new roommate. I'm from Nigeria. I know, the girl interrupted. They told me, international exchange student. She said it the way someone might say temporary inconvenience. What's your name? Minjai. The girl moved to her side of the room without offering anything else. Not a handshake, not a smile, not even eye contact. Barbara felt something crack inside her chest, but she kept smiling. It's nice to meet you, Minjai. I hope we can. I study late. I need quiet. Minjai plugged in earbuds and turned toward her desk, a wall of silence more effective than any physical barrier. That night, Barbara lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the foreign sounds of a city that didn't know her name. Car horns in melodies she didn't recognize, voices speaking a language she was still learning, the distant bass of K-pop from someone's room down the hall. She thought about her mother's face at the airport, trying so hard to be brave and fight the tears when she was about to board the plane. Her little brother crying into her shoulder. Her best friend making her promise to video call every day. She thought about the scholarship that had made this possible, the essay she'd written about cultural bridges and global citizenship, the dreams she'd packed more carefully than her clothes. And she thought about tomorrow, her first day at Hanseong Elite Academy, one of the most prestigious international schools in Seoul, where students drove cars worth more than houses, where uniforms were tailored, not bought off racks, where Barbara would be one of maybe 5 black students in the entire school. She didn't cry. She refused to cry. But her hands shook as she set her alarm for 5 a.m., and sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of falling through floors that kept disappearing beneath her feet. Before we proceed, we would love to hear where in the world you are watching from. Hit the like and subscribe button to stay connected for more heartwarming stories. Your support means everything to us. Now, let's continue with Barbara's journey. The uniform fit perfectly: navy blazer with the school crest embroidered in silver thread, crisp white shirt, pleated skirt that fell exactly to her knees, burgundy tie knotted with precision. Barbara had practiced the knot 17 times the night before. She'd ironed every crease, polished her shoes until they gleamed. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., she looked like she belonged. It was a beautiful lie. The subway to Gangnam Station was packed with morning commuters, all of them moving with the synchronized efficiency of people who knew exactly where they belonged. Barbara gripped the overhead rail, her backpack heavy with new textbooks, her heart heavier with anticipation she couldn't name. Hanseong Elite Academy sat on a hill overlooking Seoul, all glass and steel and architectural ambition. The main building looked like it should house a tech company, not teenagers. Security gates, manicured lawns, a fountain in the courtyard where water danced to invisible music. Students streamed through the gates in clusters, their laughter carrying on the cold morning air. Barbara watched them, the easy way they touched each other's shoulders, shared earbuds, finished each other's sentences. The casual intimacy of people who'd known each other for years. She didn't belong to any of those clusters. The administration office smelled like coffee and printer toner. The vice principal, a man with kind eyes and careful English, walked her through her schedule. You'll be in class 2A. It's our international track. About 30% foreign students, 70% Korean. Very diverse. He said it like he expected her to be impressed. What about other Nigerian students? Barbara asked. Or other African students? Something flickered across his face. We have 2 students from South Africa and 1 from Kenya. They're in different grade levels, but I can arrange introductions. That's okay, Barbara said quickly. She didn't need pity introductions. She needed to just survive the day. Class 2A was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a hallway that smelled like floor wax and teenage anxiety. Through the window in the door, Barbara could see students already at their desks, talking, laughing, living. She straightened her shoulders, adjusted her tie, reminded herself that she was smart, she was capable, she deserved to be here. Then she opened the door. Silence fell like a curtain. 30 pairs of eyes turned toward her. The conversation died mid-sentence. Even the teacher, a woman in her 40s with wire-rimmed glasses, paused in writing on the board. Ah, the teacher said in English. You must be our new student. Class, this is Barbara. She's joining us from Nigeria. Then, in Korean, she added something that made several students laugh, not unkindly, but not warmly either. Barbara, you can take the empty seat in the back, next to Yi-sung. Barbara walked down the aisle between desks, feeling every eye track her movement. Whispers started, soft but audible. She's so tall. Look at her hair. Is she really going to sit there? The empty desk was by the window in the last row, and sitting in the desk next to it, headphones in, eyes fixed on something outside, was the most beautiful boy Barbara had ever seen. Not handsome, not cute, beautiful. He had the kind of face that belonged on billboards, sharp jawline, perfect skin, dark hair falling just so across his forehead. His uniform was immaculate except for the top button of his shirt, which hung open in deliberate rebellion. His fingers, long and elegant, tapped an invisible rhythm against his desk. He didn't look at her as she sat down. He didn't acknowledge her at all. Barbara pulled out her notebook, her pencil case, trying to make herself small. But she could feel the attention of the class still on her, curiosity mixed with something else. Judgment? Assessment? She couldn't tell. The girl in front of them turned around, a smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. Welcome, she said in perfect English. I'm Hyjin. If you need help with anything, let me know. Thank you, Barbara said, relieved to find a friendly face. Although, Hyjin added, her smile sharpening, sitting next to Yi-sung on your first day. Brave choice. Or maybe you just didn't know. Didn't know what? But Hyjin had already turned back around, leaving Barbara's question hanging in the air like smoke. The morning classes passed in a blur of Korean and English, subjects she knew and subjects that felt foreign. Her classmates were brilliant, answering questions in 3 languages, referencing concepts she'd only heard about. These weren't just good students. They were elite in every sense of the word. At mid-morning break, students clustered in groups. Barbara stayed at her desk, pretending to study but really just trying to figure out where she fit in this carefully organized social hierarchy. That's when she noticed him finally look her way. Yi-sung had removed his headphones. His eyes, dark and unreadable, studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You're in my light," he said. His English was flawless, his voice low and smooth. Barbara glanced at the window, confused. "I'm sorry." "You're blocking my view. Could you move your bag?" She looked down. Her backpack was indeed in the line of sight to the window. She moved it quickly, embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't." But he'd already put his headphones back in, dismissing her as completely as if she'd never existed. Heat rushed to Barbara's cheeks. Not embarrassment this time, anger. She'd flown halfway across the world, earned a competitive scholarship, worked her entire life to be here, and she was being treated like an inconvenient object blocking someone's precious view. Barbara leaned toward him, close enough that he couldn't ignore her. "Excuse me," she said, loud enough to cut through whatever music he was listening to. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "I don't know who you are or why everyone seems to think you're special, but I'm not here to be invisible. If my presence bothers you, that's a you problem, not a me problem. Are we clear?" For a long moment, Yi-sung just stared at her. Then, something impossible happened. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth, but it transformed his entire face from beautiful to devastating. "Crystal clear," he said softly. Then he turned back to the window, but this time she caught something in his expression, not annoyance. Interest. The girl sitting in front of them, Hae-jin, had turned around again, her eyes wide with shock. Around them, other students were staring, some with their mouths literally open. Barbara had just done something apparently no one else had dared to do. She challenged Yi-sung. And somehow, impossibly, she was still breathing. Lunch at Hanseong Elite Academy was like a fashion show where everyone was both model and judge. The cafeteria was all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, more upscale restaurant than school dining hall. Students moved through the space with practiced grace, their conversations a mixture of Korean, English, Mandarin, and Japanese. Barbara stood in the lunch line, tray in hand, trying to decide between bibimbap and something she couldn't identify. "The japchae is good," a voice said beside her, "if you like noodles." Barbara turned to find a girl with a bright smile and hair dyed a warm brown. She was shorter than Barbara by at least 6 inches, with round cheeks and eyes that actually looked friendly. "I'm Soo-yeon," the girl said in English, though her accent was thick. "You're the new student, right? From Nigeria." "Barbara," she said, relief flooding through her. "And yes, just started today." "I saw what happened in class with Yi-sung." Soo-yeon's eyes sparkled with amusement. "That was amazing. No one talks to him like that." "Why not?" Soo-yeon loaded her tray with shocking efficiency, steering Barbara through the lunch line like a seasoned navigator. "Because Yi-sung is... well, he's Yi-sung. His family owns half of Gangnam. His grandfather founded one of the biggest entertainment companies in Korea. He's been modeling since he was 14. Girls literally transfer to this school just to be in the same building as him." Barbara glanced across the cafeteria to where Yi-sung sat alone at a table by the window, headphones in, picking at his food with the interest of someone going through motions. "He doesn't look happy about it," Barbara observed. "He's not happy about anything," Soo-yeon said. "He's been like that for the past year, ever since his mother." She stopped abruptly. "Never mind, not my story to tell. Come on, you can sit with me and my friends." Soo-yeon's table was a mix of Korean students and international students, all of them friendly in the way of people who'd been outsiders themselves. They asked Barbara questions about Nigeria, about her flight, about her first impressions of Seoul. No one stared at her skin or her hair. No one made her feel like an exhibit. For the first time since landing in Korea, Barbara felt like she could breathe. Until she noticed Hae-jin watching from 3 tables over, her expression calculating. The girls around Hae-jin were all stunning, perfect skin, perfect hair, perfect uniforms that somehow looked designer despite being identical to everyone else's. They whispered behind their hands, eyes flickering toward Barbara and then away. "Don't mind them," Suyeon said, following Barbara's gaze. "That's Haijin's crew. They're territorial." Territorial about what? About Yi-sung. Suyeon lowered her voice. Haijin has been trying to date him since freshman year, so has half the school, but he doesn't date anyone, doesn't really talk to anyone, just comes to class, does his work, and leaves. It's like he's here but not really here, you know. Barbara looked at him again. He was staring out the window, lost in thoughts that seemed to weigh on him like physical things. She knew that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror often enough. That afternoon, Barbara had her first encounter with the Korean education system's legendary intensity. 5 classes back-to-back, each one moving at a pace that left her frantically scribbling notes. Mathematics in English. History in Korean with English subtitles on the board. Literature that assumed everyone had read books she'd never heard of. By the time the final bell rang, her brain felt like it had been through a marathon. She was packing her bag when she noticed something on her desk. A folded piece of paper, tucked under her pencil case. Barbara glanced around. Most students had already left. Yi-sung was gone, his desk cleared with military precision. She unfolded the paper. Inside, in handwriting so perfect it looked printed, "You were wrong about the proof in math class. Line 7, check your logic." Barbara stared at the note. She flipped open her math notebook, found the proof she'd worked through, and... He was right. She'd made an error in her logical progression. A small one, but an error nonetheless. She didn't know whether to be impressed or annoyed. She settled on both. The next morning, Barbara arrived at school 15 minutes early. She had a plan. She pulled out her own piece of paper and wrote in her neatest handwriting, "Thanks for the math help, but you were wrong about the English assignment. Shakespeare wasn't advocating for revenge in Hamlet. He was exploring the cost of inaction. Maybe read it again." She placed the note on Yi-sung's desk and went to her own seat, pretending to read. He arrived exactly 3 minutes before the bell, his timing as precise as everything else about him. He saw the note immediately, picked it up, read it. Then, for the second time, he smiled. Barbara's heart did something complicated in her chest. He didn't say anything, just pulled out his own notebook and started writing. When the teacher arrived and class began, Barbara was sure that was the end of it. But at the end of class, there was another note on her desk. "Tache, coffee after school. There's a place near the school. We can argue about literature properly." Barbara stared at the note for a full minute. Was Yi-sung asking her out? Or was this just about proving who was smarter? She honestly couldn't tell. Suyeon appeared at her elbow. "What's that?" "Nothing," Barbara said quickly, shoving the note in her bag. But Suyeon had seen Yi-sung's handwriting. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, did he just ask you to?" "It's not what you think." "Barbara," Suyeon grabbed her arm. "Do you know what this means? Yi-sung doesn't talk to people. He definitely doesn't invite people for coffee. This is huge." "It's probably nothing." But when she looked up, Yi-sung was watching her from across the room, waiting for an answer. Barbara pulled out her own paper and wrote one word: "When." She placed it on his desk as she walked past. Didn't wait for his response, didn't look back. But she felt his eyes on her all the way out the door. And that feeling, dangerous and electric and completely terrifying, stayed with her through every class, every moment, every breath until the final bell rang, and she found herself standing outside the school gates, wondering if she was about to make the best or worst decision of her life. The coffee shop was called Autumn's End, tucked between a designer handbag store and a cosmetics shop that looked more like an art gallery. Through the window, Barbara could see exposed brick walls, hanging plants, and shelves lined with books in multiple languages. She was 10 minutes early. Yi-sung was already there. He sat at a corner table, still in his school uniform but with the tie loosened and the blazer draped over the chair beside him. 2 cups of coffee sat on the table, one in front of him, one in front of the empty chair. He'd ordered for her. Barbara felt a flicker of annoyance, presumptuous, but when she sat down and took a sip, it was exactly how she liked it, Cream, 1 sugar, strong enough to taste like coffee but smooth enough not to burn. How did you know? She asked. I paid attention. He said it simply, like it was obvious. You always get the same thing at the school cafeteria in the morning, Americano with cream and 1 sugar. He'd been watching her, noticing her. The thought sent a shiver down Barbara's spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. So, Yi-sung said, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted his right to take up space. Tell me about Nigeria. You first, Barbara countered. Tell me about Korea. His lips twitched. I've lived here my whole life. There's nothing interesting to tell. Then tell me something uninteresting. He studied her for a moment, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone quieter. Someone who would fade into the background and try not to cause trouble. Sorry to disappoint. You didn't. His gaze was steady and tense. The opposite, actually. Barbara felt heat rise in her cheeks. She took another sip of coffee to buy herself time. Your turn. Ask me something. Why Korea? Why not study in the US or the UK like most international students? It was a fair question, and one Barbara had been asked a dozen times by family members who didn't understand. Because, she said slowly, when I was 13, my dad left, just walked out one day and never came back. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. My little brother started getting into trouble at school. Everything was falling apart. She paused, memories pressing in. Yi-sung said nothing, just listened with an attention that felt like its own kind of gift. One night my cousin showed me this Korean drama, Guardian, the Lonely and Great God. Have you seen it? He nodded. There was this scene where the main character talks about how every person is living their own story, fighting their own battles, and how sometimes just surviving is the bravest thing you can do. And I don't know, something about that just resonated. I started watching more dramas, learning Korean, reading about the culture. It became this escape, but also this goal. I wanted to understand how a country could create art that made a Nigerian teenager feel seen. She looked at him directly. So I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote essays until my fingers cramped, took Korean language certification tests, and when I got accepted here, to this school, to this opportunity, it felt like proof that I could build my own story, that I didn't have to just survive my circumstances, I could transcend them. Silence stretched between them. Barbara immediately regretted being so honest, so vulnerable with someone she barely knew. But then Yi-sung said quietly, My mother left when I was 15. Barbara's breath caught. She was an actress, incredibly talented, but the industry here, it's brutal. The pressure, the expectations, the constant scrutiny. She started having panic attacks, then depression. My father, he's CEO of the family company, he didn't understand mental health, thought it was weakness, thought she could just try harder to be happy. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. One day I came home from school and found a note. She'd gone to France, said she needed space to remember who she was before all of this, before the fame, before my father, before me. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. That was 2 years ago. She emails sometimes, birthday cards, but she's not coming back. Yi-sung. Everyone here thinks I have this perfect life. The looks, the money, the opportunities. And maybe I do. But perfection is just another kind of prison, you know? Everyone expects you to be grateful for your cage just because it's made of gold. He looked at her, and for the first time, Barbara saw past the beauty to the pain underneath. That's why I noticed you, he continued. Because you don't look at me like I'm a prize to be won or a status symbol to collect. You just look at me like I'm a person, and I can't remember the last time someone did that. Barbara reached across the table. She didn't plan it. Her hand just moved, covering his. His skin was warm. You are a person, she said firmly. A complicated, brilliant, occasionally infuriating person, but a person. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. You're going to cause trouble for me, aren't you? Probably. Good, he smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. I could use some trouble. They stayed in that coffee shop until the sun set and the owner started giving them pointed looks. They talked about books and music and the pressure of expectations. They argued about whether Shakespeare was overrated, Barbara said no. Yi-sung said absolutely. They discovered they both loved rainy days and hated horror movies and believed that pineapple on pizza was a crime against humanity. And when they finally left, walking side by side through the neon-lit streets of Gangnam, Barbara felt something shift inside her. This was dangerous. This was impossible. This was exactly what she'd been too afraid to hope for. Barbara, Yi-sung said as they reached the subway station where they'd have to part ways. Tomorrow, would you? His phone rang. He glanced at the screen and something in his expression shuddered. I have to take this, he said. It's my father. He stepped away, answering in rapid Korean. Barbara couldn't understand all the words, but she understood the tone, sharp, defensive, tired. When he came back, the warmth from earlier was gone. I have to go, he said. Family, situation. Is everything okay? It's never okay. He started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. Today was good, really good. Thank you for, he seemed to struggle for words, for being real with me. Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd of commuters, leaving Barbara standing alone with a half-finished coffee going cold in her hand, and the feeling that she'd just glimpsed something precious and fragile that could shatter at any moment. The next day at school, everything was different. Yi-sung's desk was empty. He's not coming today, Soo-yeon whispered during homeroom. I heard his father pulled him out for some family business thing. Happens sometimes. Barbara tried not to feel disappointed. Tried not to feel like the universe was already proving that whatever was starting between them was too fragile to survive in the real world. But then, at lunch, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Sorry about today. My father had a come to Jesus, meeting about my grades and my future and my attitude. Apparently I'm not living up to the family name. Standard Thursday. JK. Barbara smiled despite herself and typed, JK. He replied immediately, Yi-sung Kim. I should have introduced myself properly. I'm working on my manners. How's that going? She typed back, matching his energy. Terribly, but I have a good teacher now. Reading that made Barbara's heart do that complicated thing again. She was composing a reply when Hae-jin appeared at her table, flanked by two other girls from her crew. Barbara, Hae-jin said, her smile sharp as glass. Can we talk privately? Soo-yeon shot Barbara a warning look, but Barbara stood. She wasn't going to hide. They walked to an empty classroom. The moment the door closed, Hae-jin's smile vanished. I'm going to make this very simple, she said. Stay away from Yi-sung. Barbara crossed her arms. And why would I do that? Because you don't belong here. You're a charity case playing dress-up in a world you don't understand. Yi-sung is. Yi-sung is his own person, Barbara interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. And last I checked, he gets to decide who he spends time with. One of the other girls laughed coldly. You really think he's interested in you? Please. He's probably just being polite because you're the diversity project of the semester. The words hit like a physical blow. Barbara felt something hot and sharp lodge in her chest. Whatever you think is happening between you two, Hae-jin continued, it's not real. It's not going to last. And when it ends, and it will end, you're going to be the one who looks pathetic, not him. So do yourself a favor and back off before you embarrass yourself even more. Barbara took a slow breath. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Never let them see you break. Never give them that power. Are you done? Barbara asked calmly. Hae-jin blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Because I have a chemistry lab to get to. And honestly, this conversation is getting boring. She walked to the door. He'll never choose you, Hae-jin called after her. You know that, right? His family would never accept someone like you. You're just a phase, a rebellion, nothing more. Barbara paused with her hand on the door handle. You know what I think, she said without turning around. I think you're scared, because for the first time, Yi-sung is actually interested in someone, and that someone isn't you. She walked out before Hae-jin could respond. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were burning. But she didn't cry. Not until she locked herself in a bathroom stall and let the tears come in silent, shaking waves. Because Hae-jin was right about one thing. This was impossible. Barbara was falling for a boy whose world was so different from hers, they might as well be from different planets. A boy whose family probably had expectations and plans that didn't include a Nigerian exchange student. A boy who was beautiful and brilliant and broken in ways she was only beginning to understand. What was she thinking? Her phone buzzed. I can't stop thinking about yesterday, about talking with you, about the way you listen like every word matters. I know this is complicated. I know it probably shouldn't happen. But would you have lunch with me tomorrow? Somewhere off campus, just us? JK. Barbara stared at the message through her tears. She should say no. She should protect her heart. She should be smart and practical and safe. Instead, she typed, yes, and pressed send before she could change her mind. Quick pause, beautiful people. Are you team Barbara and Yi-sung, or do you think this relationship is heading for disaster? Drop a comment and let us know. And if you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button because things are about to get even more intense. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Let's continue. The restaurant Yi-sung chose was in Itaewon, far enough from school that they wouldn't run into classmates. It was a small Italian place tucked up 3 flights of stairs, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles and the smell of fresh bread that made Barbara's mouth water. How did you find this place? She asked as they settled into a corner booth. My mother used to bring me here, Yi-sung said. Before everything. She said it was the only place in Seoul where she felt like she could just be herself. Not an actress, not a wife, not anyone's expectation, just herself. He said it matter-of-factly, but Barbara heard the weight underneath. They ordered pasta and talked about nothing important. Favorite movies, worst hairstyles from middle school, whether learning Korean or learning English was harder. They agreed both were nightmares in their own ways. But halfway through the meal, Yi-sung put down his fork and looked at her seriously. Hae-jin talked to you yesterday, didn't she? Barbara froze. How did you? She always does this. Whenever I show interest in anyone, she stages an intervention. Usually it works. Usually the person gets scared and backs off. Should I be scared? Probably, he leaned forward. Barbara, I need you to understand something. My family, they're not normal. The expectations, the pressure, the control. My father has planned out my life to the minute. What university I'll attend, what major I'll study, what company I'll eventually run. Who I'll marry, there's already a short list of appropriate families. Barbara's stomach twisted. So why are we here? Because for the first time in my life, I don't care about the plan. His eyes were intense, almost fierce. I'm so tired of being the perfect son, the perfect student, the perfect heir. I'm tired of living my life according to someone else's script. And then you showed up, and you're so completely yourself, and it made me realize how long I've been pretending to be someone I'm not. He reached across the table, taking her hand. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be complicated. My family will have opinions. People at school will talk. Hae-jin and her crew will make your life difficult. And I can't promise that I won't mess this up because I've never actually dated anyone before and I have no idea what I'm doing. Barbara laughed despite the tears suddenly burning in her eyes. You've never dated anyone. Never saw the point. It was always so transactional. People wanting to date me for my family name or my face or because I could boost their social standing. No one ever wanted to just know me. I want to know you, Barbara said softly. I know, he smiled. That's why this is terrifying. They sat there in the candlelight, hands linked across the table, and Barbara felt herself falling into something that was definitely dangerous and possibly doomed, but felt more real than anything she'd ever experienced. So what do we do? She asked. We try, Yi-sung said simply. We try and we see what happens and we deal with problems as they come. And if it gets to be too much, if you decide this isn't worth it, I'll understand. But Barbara, his grip on her hand tightened. I really hope you think it's worth it, because I already do. That was the moment Barbara knew she was in real trouble. Not because of Hae-jin or social hierarchies or cultural differences, but because she was absolutely, completely, terrifyingly in love with Yi-sung Kim. And there was no going back now. The next 2 weeks were the happiest and most stressful of Barbara's life. Happy because Yi-sung was wonderful. He texted her good morning and good night in a mix of English and Korean. He left small notes in her textbooks, corrections to her homework, yes, but also quotes from poems he thought she'd like, or drawings of the view from his window. He walked her to the subway station after school, even though it meant going out of his way. They met at the coffee shop 3 more times, at the Italian restaurant twice. Once, he took her to an art gallery in Samcheong-dong, where they spent 3 hours arguing about modern art and whether a completely white canvas could be considered profound or pretentious. It's a commentary on the emptiness of contemporary consumer culture, Yi-sung insisted. It's a blank canvas that someone sold for millions of dollars, Barbara countered. That's not profound, that's just capitalism. He'd laughed so hard that people turned to stare. But the happiness came with a cost. At school, the whispers intensified. Barbara would walk into the bathroom and conversations would stop. She'd sit in the cafeteria and feel eyes on her back. Someone created a poll on the school's anonymous messaging app. How long until Yi-sung gets bored? A, 1 week. B, 2 weeks. C, she'll mess it up first. Soo-yeon showed it to her with an apologetic wince. Don't let it get to you, Soo-yeon said. They're just jealous. But it did get to her. How could it not? The worst part was that Yi-sung had to keep their relationship relatively quiet. Not because he was ashamed, he insisted, but because his father had spies everywhere. Teachers who reported back. Family friends who'd mention if they saw him with someone inappropriate. Just until I figure out how to handle my father, he said. Just until I can present this the right way. Barbara understood, but understanding didn't make it hurt less when he couldn't hold her hand in the hallways. When he had to pretend she was just another classmate in front of certain people. It felt like being a secret, and Barbara had been invisible for too much of her life to accept being hidden. Things came to a head on a Friday afternoon. Barbara was at her locker, exchanging books, when 3 senior girls approached. She recognized them vaguely, friends of Hai-jin's older sister. So you're the one Yi-sung is slumming it with, the tallest one said in English. Barbara closed her locker carefully. Excuse me. Do you really think this is going to work? His family will never accept you. You're just an experiment, a phase. I'm a person, Barbara said, her voice level despite the rage building in her chest. And what happens between Yi-sung and me is none of your business. It became our business when you started embarrassing one of the most prominent families in Seoul. Another girl chimed in. Do you know what his grandfather said when he heard Yi-sung was spending time with a... She didn't finish the sentence, but Barbara could fill in the blank. The word hung in the air between them, invisible but devastating. You should leave, the tall girl said. Go back to your country, save yourself the humiliation. Barbara felt something inside her crack. She'd dealt with prejudice before, growing up in Nigeria, being tall and dark-skinned in a society that sometimes prized lighter skin. But this was different. This was being reduced to her race in a foreign country where she was already fighting to belong. No, Barbara said quietly. No. No, I'm not leaving. I earned my place here. I worked harder than most of you ever will to get this opportunity. And if my existence makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not mine. She walked away with her head high and her eyes burning. She made it to an empty classroom before the tears came. That's where Yi-sung found her 20 minutes later. Barbara, he stopped in the doorway, taking in her tear-stained face. What happened? She told him, all of it. The girls, the words, the feeling of being reduced to something less than human. His face went white, then red, then dangerous. Who were they? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. He crouched in front of her, taking her hands. Barbara, I am so sorry. This is my fault. I should have been more public about us. I should have protected you better. You can't protect me from the world being the world, Barbara said, wiping her eyes. And I don't need protecting. I can fight my own battles. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to, not alone. He pulled her into his arms, and Barbara let herself cry properly. Not quiet, dignified tears. Big, ugly, soul-deep sobs that came from a place of exhaustion and frustration and fear. When she finally pulled back, Yi-sung cupped her face in his hands. I'm going to tell my father, he said. This weekend, I'm going to tell him about you, about us. And whatever happens, happens, but I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending you don't mean everything to me. Yi-sung, your family. My family doesn't get to control who I care about. His jaw was set, determined. I've been their perfect son for 17 years. I've followed every rule, met every expectation. But this is where I draw the line. Barbara wanted to protest, wanted to tell him not to risk everything for her. But she was also tired of being hidden, tired of being treated like a shameful secret. Okay, she whispered, tell them. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Neither of them knew that it would be the last peaceful moment they'd have for a very long time. Yi-sung didn't come to school on Monday. Or Tuesday. By Wednesday, rumors were spreading like wildfire. His father had found out. There'd been a huge fight. Yi-sung was being sent to study abroad. No, he was being transferred to another school. No, his father had disowned him. Barbara tried calling, texting, everything. All her messages went unanswered. Soo-yeon pulled her aside at lunch. I heard from my cousin who works at his family's company. There was a massive confrontation, yelling in the offices. His father threatened to cut him off completely. Barbara felt sick. This was her fault. She'd let herself fall for him knowing it was complicated, knowing his world and hers were incompatible. And now he was paying the price. On Thursday, she was called to the vice principal's office. Her heart hammered as she walked down the administrative hallway. Had they found out? Was she in trouble? Was her scholarship at risk? But when she entered the office, it wasn't just the vice principal waiting. It was a man in an expensive suit, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, radiating power and control. Yi-sung's father. Miss Barbara, he said in perfect English, gesturing to a chair. Please sit, we have much to discuss. Barbara sat, her hands clenched in her lap. I understand you've been spending time with my son, Mr. Kim continued, his voice pleasant but his eyes cold. I want you to understand something. Yi-sung has responsibilities, expectations, a future that has been carefully planned and cultivated. He is the heir to a multi-billion-won enterprise. His marriage will be strategic. His partnerships will be calculated. Everything he does reflects on our family name. Barbara said nothing, just listened with her chin high. You seem like a smart young woman, Mr. Kim said, so I'm going to be direct. Name your price. Barbara blinked. I'm sorry. How much would it take for you to end this? Friendship? With my son? I'm prepared to be generous. A full scholarship to any university you choose, anywhere in the world. Living expenses covered. A job waiting for you after graduation. All you have to do is leave Yi-sung alone. For a moment, Barbara couldn't breathe. He was trying to buy her, like she was a problem to be solved with money. Mr. Kim, Barbara said slowly, with all due respect, I'm not interested in your money, and I'm not going to end my friendship with Yi-sung just because you don't approve. His expression hardened. Then let me be clearer. If you continue this relationship, I will make your life very difficult. I have connections throughout this school, this city. I can make sure your scholarship is revoked. I can make sure no university in Korea will accept you. I can make sure that every door you try to open slams shut in your face. Barbara felt cold spread through her body. You're threatening me. I'm protecting my family. He leaned forward. You don't belong in Yi-sung's world. Surely you can see that. This isn't about you personally. It's about reality, about the way things are. The way things are, Barbara repeated. Her voice shook, but not with fear, with rage. You mean the way rich people think they can control everything and everyone. The way you think money makes you better than other people. I'm simply being practical. You're being cruel. Barbara stood, her hands still shaking. And you're underestimating your son. Yi-sung is stronger than you think, and he's smarter than you give him credit for. Whatever control you think you have over him, over me, you're wrong. She walked to the door. Miss Barbara, Mr. Kim called. If you walk out that door, you will regret it. She looked back at him. Maybe, but at least I'll still have my self-respect. Then she left, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She made it to the bathroom before she threw up. That night, at 11 p.m., there was a knock on Barbara's dormitory window. She nearly screamed before she saw who it was. Yi-sung. He was standing on the fire escape, looking exhausted and determined and absolutely crazy. Barbara rushed to open the window. "What are you doing? You could have been killed." "I had to see you." He climbed in, bringing cold night air with him. "My father told me about the meeting, about what he said to you." Yi Sung. "I'm so sorry, Barbara. I'm so sorry he threatened you. I'm sorry I dragged you into this mess." "You didn't drag me anywhere," Barbara said firmly. "I chose this. I chose you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "My father gave me an ultimatum," he said into her hair. "End things with you, or he cuts me off completely. No money, no support, no family. I'd have to leave the company, leave everything." Barbara's heart broke. "Yi Sung, you can't give up your entire future for me." "Why not?" He pulled back, his hands on her shoulders. "What kind of future is it if I'm miserable? If I'm living someone else's life? Barbara, you made me remember what it feels like to want something, to choose something for myself." "But I'm not finished." He took a breath. "I have savings, money my mother left me that my father can't touch, enough to finish school, pay for university. It won't be the life I had, but it'll be mine. And if you're part of it, if you want to be part of it, then it'll be worth it." Barbara felt tears streaming down her face. "You're insane." "Probably." He smiled, that beautiful, devastating smile. "But I'm also sure, more sure than I've ever been about anything. Your father is going to make our lives hell." "Let him try." Yi Sung cupped her face, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Barbara, I've spent my entire life being afraid. Afraid of disappointing people, afraid of making the wrong choice, afraid of not being perfect. But being with you, it's the first time I've been brave, and I don't want to stop." She kissed him, desperately, completely, pouring every feeling she couldn't voice into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Barbara whispered, "So what now?" "Now," Yi Sung said, "we stop hiding. We stop apologizing for existing. We stop letting other people's expectations define us. Together." Together. They stayed up all night, making plans. Yi Sung would move out of his family home, find a small apartment. Barbara would help him budget, figure out how to live on his savings. They'd both work part-time jobs. They'd study hard, get into good universities, build lives that belonged to them. It was scary and uncertain, and absolutely crazy. It was also the most alive Barbara had ever felt. "Hold up, we need to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. Do you think they can actually make this work, or is this love story doomed? And hit that like button if you're rooting for Barbara and Yi Sung. Now, let's see what happens next." The fallout was nuclear. By the end of the week, everyone knew. Yi Sung had been cut off by his father. Barbara was dating the school's most notorious bad boy Heir. The drama was better than any K-drama on television. Hyejin's crew intensified their campaign. Someone spray-painted "Gold Digger" on Barbara's locker. Her desk was accidentally broken twice. Her textbooks went missing. Teachers who'd been friendly suddenly became cold. But Barbara didn't break. And she wasn't alone. Suyeon became her fiercest defender, shutting down gossip with a verbal precision that left people speechless. Other students, the ones who'd always been on the outskirts themselves, started sitting with Barbara at lunch, forming their own coalition of misfits and rebels. Yi Sung, free from his father's control, became more himself than Barbara had ever seen. He laughed more, relaxed more. He got a part-time job at a bookstore, came to school in regular clothes instead of designer brands, and seemed genuinely happier despite having less. "I didn't realize how heavy that life was," he told Barbara one evening as they studied together in her dorm room. Min-jae had finally warmed up to Barbara, especially after Barbara had helped her with an English essays. "All that money, all that status, it was like wearing armor every day. I couldn't breathe." They weren't perfect. They fought sometimes, about small things like who was better at Korean him versus who was better at English literature her. About big things, like whether Yi Sung should try to reconcile with his father, Barbara said yes. Yi Sung said absolutely not. But they also learned. They grew. They figured out how to be together despite coming from completely different worlds. 1 month after Yi Sung's father's ultimatum, Barbara was studying in the library when she received a visitor. Yi Sung's mother. She was beautiful, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and refined taste. But her eyes were kind, and when she smiled at Barbara, it was warm. "I've heard a lot about you," she said in accented English. "From my son." "Mrs. Kim," Barbara said, standing quickly. "I didn't know you were in Korea." "I came back when I heard what happened, what my ex-husband did." She gestured to a chair. "May I?" They sat together in the quiet library corner. "I want to apologize," Mrs. Kim said, "for my son's father, for the way he treated you. That man, he sees people as chess pieces, moves to be made. He doesn't understand love or choice or anything that can't be controlled." "It's not your fault," Barbara said. "No, but I understand what it's like to be in your position. I was an actress from a modest family when I married into the Kim family. They never truly accepted me, always made me feel like I wasn't enough. That's part of why I left. I lost myself trying to be what they wanted." She reached across the table, taking Barbara's hand. "But you," she continued, "you didn't lose yourself. You stood up to him. You stayed true to who you are. That takes incredible strength." "I almost gave up," Barbara admitted, "so many times." "But you didn't, and neither did Yi-sung. He's happier now than I've seen him in years. Freer. That's because of you." Tears pricked Barbara's eyes. "He's pretty wonderful." "He is," Mrs. Kim smiled. "And so are you. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." She stood, preparing to leave, then paused. "I've set up a trust fund for Yi-sung, separate from his father. Enough to finish school, pay for university, start his adult life. He doesn't know yet. I'm telling you first because I know he'll argue, say he doesn't need it. But he does. And I want him to have the freedom to choose his own path." Barbara's throat tightened. "Thank you." "No, thank you, for loving my son. For seeing him, really seeing him, not his name or his face or his family's money, just him." After she left, Barbara sat in the library for a long time, crying happy tears for the first time in months. The school year ended with a final dramatic flourish. The Spring Festival, the biggest event of the year, featured performances, games, and the crowning of the Spring King and Queen, voted on by students. Barbara had no expectation of winning. She wasn't even sure she wanted to. But when they announced the results at the festival's closing ceremony, she nearly fainted. Spring Queen, Barbara. Spring King, Yi-sung Kim. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Cheers from their friends, shocked silence from others, and outright protests from Hae-jin's crew. But as Barbara walked onto the stage, as Yi-sung took her hand and they stood together under the spring lights, she realized something. This was their moment, their victory, not over Hae-jin or Mr. Kim or anyone else, but over fear, over the voices that said they didn't belong together, over every obstacle that had tried to keep them apart. Yi-sung leaned close, his lips near her ear. "You know what happens now, right?" "What?" "The king and queen have to dance." Music started, a slow, beautiful song that echoed across the festival grounds. And there, in front of everyone who doubted them, whispered about them, tried to tear them apart, Barbara and Yi-sung danced. She wasn't a perfect dancer. She stepped on his toes twice. But he just laughed and pulled her closer. "I love you," he whispered. "I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you so much it terrifies me." Barbara's heart felt like it might explode. "I love you too," she whispered back, "even though you're infuriating and stubborn and occasionally insufferable." "Occasionally. Frequently." He kissed her then, right there in front of everyone, and the festival erupted in cheers and whistles, and probably some angry protests that Barbara couldn't hear over the sound of her own happiness. This was what love looked like. Not perfect, not easy, not what anyone had planned or expected, but real and brave and completely beautifully theirs. Epilogue, 2 years later. Barbara stood in the doorway of their tiny apartment, boxes stacked everywhere, and couldn't stop smiling. The space was small, a studio in Hongdae above a coffee shop that smelled perpetually of roasted beans, but it was theirs. Yi-sung was at the university, finishing his final exam. Barbara had graduated early, her scholarship covering everything despite Mr. Kim's threats. Apparently, academic excellence spoke louder than family grudges. She was working at an international NGO now, helping build educational bridges between Nigeria and Korea. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. And in 3 months, she and Yi-sung would both start graduate school. Different programs, same university, same city, same life they'd built from nothing. Her phone buzzed. Done with the exam. Bringing dinner. Hope you like Japanese because I already ordered. Also, my mother called. She wants to have dinner with us this weekend. Fair warning, she's going to ask about marriage plans, again. JK. Barbara laughed, typing back. Tell her we're too young and too broke for marriage. I told her that. She offered to pay. Of course she did. Should I say yes? Barbara's fingers hovered over the keyboard. 2 years ago, that question would have terrified her. The commitment, the permanence, the risk of losing everything. But now, maybe we should talk about it. Hypothetically. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Hypothetically, I've already picked out a ring, but I'm waiting for the right moment, the perfect moment. Barbara's heart stuttered. And when will that be? When you're ready, whether that's tomorrow or 10 years from now. I'm not going anywhere. She set down her phone and looked around their tiny apartment. At the mismatched furniture they'd bought secondhand. At the photos on the walls, her family in Nigeria, his mother in Paris, the 2 of them at their high school graduation. This life wasn't what either of them had planned. It was better. Because it was theirs. Built on choice and courage, and the kind of love that refused to be controlled or contained or compromised. The door opened. Yi-sung walked in, carrying takeout bags and wearing that smile that still made her breath catch. Home, he said simply, kissing her forehead. Home, she agreed. And for the first time in her life, Barbara truly understood what that word meant. Not a place, not a country, but a person. The person who saw you completely and loved you anyway. The person who chose you every single day, despite easier options. The person who made you brave. Barbara had crossed an ocean to find herself. Instead, she'd found something even better. She'd found home. Thank you so much for joining us on Barbara and Yi-sung's incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good romance, and subscribe for more beautiful stories. We'd also love to know, what was your favorite moment in this story? Drop a comment below. Remember, love is always worth fighting for, no matter how complicated the journey. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love.